for staying this late at 5:30. Today I'm the last speaker. And in case you have lost track of what day it is Thursday. So tomorrow is the last day. And so the good thing is it will all soon be over. Anyways, as the program tells you, I have been scheduled for 2 separate presentations, and maybe I'll just kind of seamlessly transit from one to the other.
That's fine.
And the theme, the major theme, the overall theme of both presentations can be summarized in one simple phrase. And that phrase is, there is but one reality.
Yes.
You're in the way of the videographer.
Getting out of your way.
Anyways, you may have to do some editing, Jeff. There is but one reality. You may not know it. I may not know it. Nobody may know it except God. But still, that would not change the fact that there is but one reality in here and out there. And I am not a great believer in labels. All I know is that everybody claims, whether they are religious, whether they are scientists, whether they are philosophers, or whatever label they put on them, all claim that they are searching for the truth. And I believe truth agrees with truth regardless of its source. So I'm not disturbed, some people, when they say, oh, pal, this is not science, this is non-science. Yes, it's non-science, but not nonsense. And if it is true, it should agree regardless of where the truth came from, whether it came from Pope or an idiot like me or a scientist or whoever. Because the truth must agree with truth. Now, falsity or the falsehood may or may not agree with each other, and if it does agree, it's by coincidence. And I'm sure you have all noticed many, many examples of falsity agreeing with another falsity. Why? Because the same mathematics can explain more than one thing. In fact, to give you a ridiculous example of it, childish example of it, 2 children were arguing about the number 10. One said, it's 5 plus 5 and I can prove it. Another said, no way, it's 9 plus 1 and I have demonstrated it. And the other said, it's 3 plus 7. And they kept arguing because the same math, number 10, again, I'm being very facetious a little bit, but you get the idea. So the first half hour of my presentation is the science part. By science, I'm trying to go back to basics. And I'm starting with, and you got to give me some credit for my chutzpah, okay? Because I'm not suggesting some minor improvements to the science of some esoteric scientist in a very narrow niche or something. I'm proposing changes to icons of science, the sainthoods of science. Such strong people as Aristotle, Galileo, Sir Isaac Newton, and even Einstein. Especially Einstein. But I will not, and I will not repeat anything that you have all received, considered, or disagreed with. I'm very aware that there are a lot of dissident physicists who disagree with Einstein. But I'm going to give you a new nugget of disagreement with Einstein, which I have not heard from anybody in any conference, let alone just the NPA conference. So let's begin with, chronologically, with the earliest of the times. About 2,500 years ago, Aristotle intuited that heavier objects fall faster. Even though he could have walked to the nearest beach, picked up 2 pebbles on the beach, dropped them both at the same time, and could have proven himself wrong. Not only he didn't do that, for 2,000 years, nobody else did either.
Right.
Now, maybe people had their reasons for not doing the experiment because they had a better insight into it. And they didn't want to do an experiment which does not meet with all of their parameters they have in mind. And that, I think, is very understandable. But the fact remains, Galileo did walk up to the Leaning Tower of Pisa and dropped different masses, 1 pound, 10 kilogram, 1 kilogram, and dropped them both at the same time, and observers on the ground informed him that none of them could detect any difference in heavier objects falling faster. They all hit the ground at the same time. So the question arises, the question I want to contest with just slightly. Again, I'm talking about slight improvements and sometimes even splitting hair improvements. My question is, did Galileo prove Aristotle wrong? I submit to you that he did not. And in the next few minutes, before I go on to Sir Isaac Newton and Einstein, I want to convince you of that fact just as simply as I can. So what did, why do I say, and my final premise in this is, so you know where I'm going, I'm saying Galileo and Aristotle were either both right or both wrong, and both at the same time. Now you're beginning to say, oh, this guy said he won't talk quantum physics. And I'm not. And I'm not saying that Galileo and Aristotle were both right and both wrong at the same time in the quantum physics sense. I'm simply saying it in the sense of comparing apples and oranges. How do I figure that? I think if you give Aristotle the benefit of doubt, and say he was thinking of relative velocity when he said heavier objects fall faster. And Galileo was thinking of absolute velocity even though he measured the relative velocity and thought he proved Aristotle wrong. Now you know this is Galilean relativity, so it's not too complex for any of us. If I walk towards you at 5 miles an hour, I'm up, my absolute velocity with respect to ground and with respect to you is the same 5 miles per hour. But for some strange reason, if you start walking towards me at 1 mile per hour, then the relative velocity between the two of us is 6 miles per hour. So when you drop an object to the floor, and again, I cautioned you, I'm splitting hair. Not only the object falls towards the earth, technically, the earth also rises towards that object, howsoever infinitesimal. And if you take that into consideration, you will have no trouble in realizing that Galileo did not prove Aristotle wrong. Now let's just giving them the benefit of doubt that each were thinking of the right, and to give another benefit of doubt to Galileo, he had no means of measuring absolute velocity. He was always measuring relative velocity because every time he dropped an object, whether it was 1 kilogram or 100 kilogram, the earth also moved, and he dropped them concurrently. I have a whole list of assumptions to really clarify this hair-splitting experience. But the idea is, I don't want to waste time now giving assumption. Just Neil should know I did go through my homework. I can email it to you, everybody, all the assumptions that I made in how the Galileo did his testing and how Aristotle perceived. But my final conclusion on that is this, that regardless of whether they were both right or regardless of whether they were both wrong, Galileo did not prove Aristotle wrong. Now, being a nice person that I am, I like to give people a benefit of doubt. So I think both Aristotle and Galileo were right. But even in that case, Galileo did not prove Aristotle wrong. Now, why were they wrong? You know that? They were wrong because Aristotle was wrong because he was several orders of magnitude off. He was not thinking of the hair-splitting difference between the Earth moving towards it. And Galileo had no way of measuring the relative absolute velocity. He could only measure relative because he could drop objects from the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and he would drop 2 or 3 at a time. But technically, you have to drop them 1 at a time and measure the time with cesium clock before it hits the Earth. Because once it hits the Earth, the absolute velocity has changed to relative velocity. I won't belabor the point.
But Galileo had no clock except the person.
Exactly. So it is not, overly generous on my part to say I like to give both of them the benefit of doubt, that both of them were right, and in spite of that, Galileo did not prove Aristotle wrong. But if you are of the inclination that no, they were both wrong, even then, Galileo did not prove Aristotle wrong. Now, this gives me, quickly, before I get into the slideshow or presentation, walk over to that little demonstration table and show you a demonstration of my disagreement with Sir Isaac Newton. And I want to start with something very simple, his first law of motion. What did he say in his first law of motion? That anybody continues to be at rest or uniform motion in a straight line unless acted upon by some external force. And I suggest to you that he made 2 mistakes in that. One is, when he said a body continues to be at rest, he probably meant a body continues to be at dead end until the obstacle is removed, rather than at rest on its own. And the second thing he said was uniform motion in a straight line. I submit to you that he meant uniform motion in a circle, or uniform acceleration in a straight line, or uniform motion in a circle modified by the Kepler's 3 laws of planetary motion if it is not completely circular. But those are minor modifications. Now, to illustrate that point, I'd like you to look towards these couple of school buses and see if it makes any sense to you. Why is this thing moved? Oh, just to trick me, right? Now, if you look at these 2 buses, I want you to tell me, and you can stand up and see if it helps. I want you to tell me if these 2 buses are at rest or are they at dead end? They are at rest. Which one? Huh? Relative to the table they're sitting on. Yeah, relative to the space. I'm not trying to pull tricks on anybody. I'm just trying to show my semantic difference between rest and dead end. Okay? So, here it is. You say that they both appear to be at rest. Right? So let's see what happens if I move this. Aha! It wasn't at rest. It was spring-wound, just like the whole universe is spring-wound. So why didn't it? So what does it mean? Is this bus at rest or at dead end? Well, let's find out. Oh, this has some power, but I didn't mean to. But the point I tried to make was that this is really at rest, it wasn't at dead end. You know what I mean? Because if I move that obstruction again, that will move. Now that only explains partially what I'm trying to say, because it explains to you the difference between rest and dead end horizontally. And I want you to think that why doesn't it apply also vertically? I submit to you that this bus, and both of those buses, will accelerate towards the center of the earth if given a chance. But there are obstacles after obstacles after obstacles. This table is an obstacle. So even if I were to take it and put it under the table, it will go down to the floor. Drill a hole in the floor, it will go down to the lower floor. Keep drilling holes and drill a hole all the way to the center of the earth, or if you prefer, even on the other end. But center of the hole is all we need. If the hole is up to the center of the earth, you drop this, it will keep accelerating, and it will be arrested at the center of the earth, and it will have no motion. That's the only time Newton is right that a body continues to be at rest. When it is at the absolute central focus of the planet or whatever the object that is. Pardon?
The Earth is moving around the sun, so
Right, that's the.
so could it be at rest there?
What do you mean? That's right. But I'm talking about with respect to this illustration. And you are basically agreeing with me.
Not really, no.
Yes, you are. Well, think about it anyways. You are agreeing with me in the sense that there is no body in this universe that is at rest. You give me one example of a body at rest that is not also at dead end. Any one body. It can be galaxy, cluster of galaxies. It can be a planet. It can be Earth. It can be anything. In fact, you answered your own question and anticipated it. Can anyone give me an example of a body at rest which is not all?
That body that you have gotten to the center of the earth.
Oops.
And the earth is still moving around the sun.
Right. And that's the exception he
It's
pointed.
not going to be at rest.
No, of course not. That's what I said. No body in this universe is at rest, so Sir Isaac Newton was wrong.
In that sense.
In that sense. And what other sense is there? I like to hear the other senses. You know what I mean? So anyways, maybe just before going to disagreement with the Einstein, maybe we can quickly raise the screen and show you another little same school bus demonstration perhaps, and see what happens. Will it go up, and then we'll turn the screen down and projector up, huh? It's pressed. It's at rest, right. Which is true. But that, you are its master. That's what I said. That's what Newton said. I don't have to say that. But Newton said that. I'm not disagreeing with Newton on that. I'm only pointing two minor disagreements with Newton. And this is not one of them. The two disagreements were, one, where he said at rest, he meant dead end by an obstacle, and until the obstacle is removed, it will move. And two, he said uniform motion in a straight line. I said, no, it's uniform acceleration in a straight line. And if the whole universe is turning around, then the acceleration of the turning equals, if the planet were to veer off at tangent, it will start accelerating in a straight line again. So in other words, the rotary motion is the acceleration that does not appear in our planetary system and rest of it. Okay, see, I have some agreement already, so it gives me hope. I mean, now that doesn't mean you are right and he's wrong, but at least it gives me courage to go on. Okay, I don't know if the camera will be able to handle this better, but I have here another school bus, and I'm going to remove the obstacle again and see what happens. Same thing. So it does work. That obstacle is the only thing that is making objects at rest. Otherwise, they are at dead end. That's what I said. Universe is spring-bound. Universe has internal energy. Maybe it's the same internal energy you were talking about. I'm not disputing that. Yes, there must be some kind of energy, internal energy, just like the bus has some internal energy. But the fact remains, nobody can name a body that is at rest, but also not at dead end by an obstacle. So I think I have made my point. Let's put the screen down, let's turn the projector on, and see if we can make some progress with this. And somebody probably knows how to adjust the focus and the distance. It probably needs some adjustment. This, in case I use it a little bit later. All right. Now, is this is not in focus? Well, you can, but the thing is, it's better. Try this. If you do it just by the sharp lines of the focus, it needs to go quite a bit more up. Okay. Good focus. Maybe move it back. The picture will get a little larger and better. All right. This is better. Anyway, I hope that there is enough lighting there. How am I doing for time?
You're doing fine. We're enjoying it.
Okay. So I mean, I was going to skip some humor, but you know, humor is also good for the soul. So that's why every once in a while I start my presentations with humor. I skipped it, so I thought I'll interject maybe a couple of them in between. And as you know, as a solo scientist, I have a lot of experience working in large corporations. In fact, I have worked for so many Fortune 500 companies that I've lost count, at least a dozen. So that means I was never a corporate boy. You know, I mean, I was a troublemaker, and if I didn't leave within a couple of years, they would fire me in a couple of years. But mostly, I was, you know, smart enough to leave before it came to that. But nonetheless, I was very perceptive, and so were other people who talked with me. They said, you know, this corporate world is for the birds because there are layoffs, and if there are no layoffs, there are rumors of layoffs, and there's always living in fear. How am I going to feed my kids? How am I going to pay my mortgage, this and that? So finally, I decided I'm going to start my own company, even if it is. And you will realize that when I started my company, I had same ambitions as IBM and E-Systems or big university lab, that it will grow and grow and grow. And it did grow. And it grew to at least a dozen, employees. You know what I mean? But you will understand my organization chart and appreciate how it really came about. See? Oh, this is upside down. No wonder. Yeah, this is better, right? Okay. Now, Neil tells me that I only have 5 minutes. But I think one assumption I want to share with you, which is applicable to both of these presentations, regardless of what you think you have a right to know. Because if you don't want to listen to it because of that bad assumption, then, you know, don't waste your time. You know what I mean? But my one assumption is this, that we live not only in a physical universe, but that physical universe is part also of a virtual universe. And if you cannot appreciate that concept, I will lose you. But the reality is that there is a physical universe, which I call finite temporal physical universe, FTPU, which is a very, very, very small subset of IEVU, infinite, eternal, virtual universe. You can, now of course, when I say finite physical universe, I don't mean finite in our eyes, because the cosmologists and astrophysics haven't come to the edge of it. But that doesn't change my belief that someday they will. The physical universe does have an edge, and at that point, the thing I mentioned about tangent, the planets will go or galaxies will wear off, and as soon as they reach the speed of light, they will become wave and they'll vanish into virtual universe. And virtual universe is everywhere. In fact, the physical universe is such a, as large as it is, is such a negligible percentage of the virtual universe that you can almost ignore it as non-existent. Even though we haven't come to the edge of it. But that's neither here nor there. Let me quickly go to Einstein, because, and the thing that I promised you, that I will point out a different disagreement with Einstein. Einstein's relativity theory, also talks about time dilation, length contraction. But for some reason, when it comes to mass, he goes berserk. Instead of applying the length contraction and time dilation in the same sense, he does it opposite. He says the rest mass is the lowest mass of a body. And as you speed it up, its mass increases. And as it approaches the speed of light, supposedly, it becomes infinite mass. That is not my calculation. However, his gamma factor is still true. In other words, instead of the rest mass increasing, as you apply the gamma factor and apply the speed of light, it decreases. It decreases to the point when it reaches the speed of light, it becomes wave and disappears from our physical universe and becomes part of the virtual universe. So that thing, all I'm saying is that Einstein was great. I think his formula works. Time dilation formula, length contraction formula works. And it will continue to work. But the mass doesn't have to be inverted. The mass will also dilate, so to speak. And then a couple of just tiny relational concepts that you may not immediately appreciate, because I didn't for many years. People talk about space and three-dimensional. I submit to you today that there are only three dimensions. If you count the time dimension in our physical universe, that's fourth dimension. But in the virtual universe, there is no time dimension. So there are only three dimensions. Now you say, well, why do we talk about two dimensions and one dimension? I submit to you that there is no such thing as a one-dimensional or two-dimensional object. Take any object with three dimensions, reduce one dimension to zero, the other two vanish instantly. So there is no such thing as a one-dimensional or two-dimensional object. The moment and it doesn't matter which one, any one of the three dimensions, you take it to zero, the other two, by definition, vanish. And so that's my disagreement with Einstein. Right. So I now transition to the second half, which I call sort of disagreements with non-science, but not nonsense. Because there is a lot of non-science which is not nonsense, just as there is a lot of science which is not nonsense, So it cuts both ways. Now, I started with this concept of physical and virtual universe. Here is a quick little table of some of the properties of the physical versus the virtual. And there are a lot more. I could have made this list easily, 100 different attributes and properties. But we don't have time to discuss all of them, so it's just as good that I didn't. But I want to give you an overview of my disagreements with other things. Now, here's just, again, a recap of the title of my two presentations. And this kind of fertilizes the brain so that you can better receive what I'm going to say. And this is in the form of a multiple choice question. And the multiple choice question is there more than one reality? Now, I'm not looking for a right answer or wrong answer, because there are no right and wrong answer. But these are some of the answers I hear when I ask the question, is there more than one reality? You make up your own mind where you stand, just as I make up my own mind where I stand. on is there more than one reality? Now, if you think that's, and then again, I don't know where you stand, and I really don't even care that much. Because this is my thinking process. But I want you to know that I did go through that thinking process, that I'm aware of the people who disagree with me, why they disagree with me, and some people are so much in disagreement with me. People like Richard Dawkins, for example. I mean, I wouldn't even want to debate with him, because there's no common ground for which. Now, I earlier asked the question, do heavier objects fall faster? Rephrasing, Aristotle's question. And here's the multiple choice question I made based on that. And this is it. And you make up your own mind. And, I tried to give a couple of different reasons. And there you go. So let me come on here now and keep going with these slides, because I do want to leave a few minutes for questions at the end, because I didn't leave any time for the questions for the first half hour about disagreements with science, but I do want to leave some time at the end so you can ask questions about both things, my disagreements with science as well as my disagreement with non-science. And of course, non-science includes not just religion, but also paranormal phenomena, metaphysics, psychology. In other words, anything that the mainstream science community rejects as voodoo, magic, it's all included in that non-science. So, I was splitting hair earlier. Let me give you another example of splitting hair. And that is another form, in the form of another multiple choice question. And the question is, does moon cause tides in your backyard swimming pool? Now assume that's not hair splitting enough. How about a cup of water in your hand? Does the moon cause tides in a cup of water in your hand? And here are some of the answers. Now, I don't know where you stand on it, but I know where I stand on it. But you can make up your own mind. Okay? But these are some of the answers some fairly intelligent people in all seriousness give to me. And I, unlike you, don't laugh at them. Because, no, that's okay. You can laugh at me, I'm here. You're among friends. I'm talking about if I were to showing this to Richard Dawkins, I dare not snicker like that. I snicker here because I know people understand where I'm coming from. Anyway, I tried to say earlier that the physical universe is almost infinitesimally small compared to the virtual universe. Let me give you why. First of all, you should take into account what you heard from others. How much of it is baryon matter, how much of it is dark matter, how much of it is dark energy, and you'll come to like 4 or 5% at the most baryon matter. But what is baryon matter made of? Mostly atoms, even if they're molecules or whatever, cells or anything you think of. But at one level or another, they are atoms of carbon or hydrogen or whatever. And in those atoms, if you break one down, an atom, you will find that between the nucleus and the electrons is so much empty space, so many orders of magnitude greater than the size of the nucleus, that if you subtract that 99.9999% of vacuum or invisible, whatever it is, space, then it loses the steam out of all that 5% baryonic matter. It becomes a very small fraction of a less than 0.1% or more, less, even less than that. But I mean, I have not really calculated it, but I did enough calculation to satisfy me that I don't need to go 50 decimal places to do it. Now, here is, now some of these things I probably don't have time to go today, but I want you to know that they exist, that I've thought about them. And one of them is this thing about I was trying to touch upon with Newton. And this is my analysis of the angular acceleration, the sun, and how the so-called UVLM accounts for all three motions of the Earth, the orbital, the spinal, and planetary, as a part of the solar system, or even galaxy for that matter. But those are the three components, and if you like someday, I will go through in detail how I arrived at those components and why they don't necessarily agree or disagree with mainstream science. And this is another one. I went through all the calculations here. This is the universal law of gravitation, basically, which is the paraphrasing of the Kepler's 3 laws of planetary motion, which now I understand also includes 2 laws of Scarborough in it, and the same universal law of gravitation applies. Incidentally, on that universal law of gravitation, I think Newton was smarter than Einstein, in the sense that when Newton came up with the universal law of gravitation, he stopped there. He didn't say, oh, this is a theory of gravity. Or he simply said, I don't know what gravity is, but this is how you can calculate the motion and the position of the planets in the future. And it fits a lot better than the retrograde complex models that others had proposed. So, you know that that's what good old Einstein should have said, because his formulas work. I think the gamma factor is substantially true, except for my disagreement with that he got it backwards when it came to mass. But if you invert it, put it in the same orientation and same sense in which you apply it to time dilation, in which you apply it to length contraction or width contraction or whatever you want to call it. But if you apply it in the same sense, it will all fit in much better. And how does this interaction takes place? Because how can something, see the question is, how can something, I didn't put these effects here, but I think you might like it. No, not the laser pointer. I have my laser pointer. I had this wheel sitting over there. Did I move it? Oh, here it is. I see it here. Okay. Now see if this makes any sense. Basically, virtual universe cannot interact with our physical universe except through some physical means. Fortunately, virtual universe has that capability. It can generate particle-antiparticle pairs ad infinitum, many different types, and that's how the particle-antiparticle pairs interact with physical universe. And it applies to light, it applies to all electromagnetic energy, it applies to movement of the planets and everything, but it is all through a very, very, very large number of small force virtual particles, many of them much less than the duration of a femtosecond. And yet, if you have enough of them surrounding all of the surface of the planet, all of the empty space from the center of the Earth to the outside, to all of the space around it, it will account for all those three components that I tried to mention earlier. And those are huge components. I know, it's mind-boggling. How can virtual particles of such small force can move the Earth? They can, given enough of them. And I'm not going to put a limit on enough of them, because you have to have not only enough of them, but also frequently enough. I mean, trillions a second, and all over the globe, all over the universe. But the only way virtual universe knows how to interact with our physical universe is through virtual particles pairs. So what is my take on that? Well, the electromagnetic propagation, I think you've said that. I think other people have said it. And this is my analysis of particles and antiparticle pairs. And it applies to all, not just light. And light happens to be more interesting in studying because we have experience with light, because our eyes receive light. Now, a lot of people think, oh, what a miracle it is, human eye. How can anybody study the human eye? How can anybody be a doctor and study the human eye and still come to the conclusion, maybe there is God, maybe there isn't, I'm not sure, so I'm not committing anyway. But to be honest with you, that's only half the battle. Yes, eye is miraculous. But the bigger part, or the other half of it, since I don't know which part plays greater role, is the light itself. As it leaves the sun and it enters through the window or through the table, the light provides the other half of the magic. Again, remember my key phrase. The only way virtual universe knows how to interact with physical universe is through particles. So where are the particles in the light? Well, there are particles, but they are not there until they hit the retina, the object, or something physical. Otherwise, they're waves. And the moment you measure them, you are interacting with them, and they become momentarily. But they pick right back up into wave. Now, why does light have to do that? Well, the light has to do that in order to interact with the objects in this room. Why does light have to interact with the objects in this room? Because there is no other way in our brain or our sensory organs or retina or the space in between them to carry the information from the light to our eyes without first interacting with the table. So in other words, the light comes, interacts with the table, and momentarily everything becomes photons. And then those photons come back again, reconstitute as light, and travel again at speed of light, as they did whenever they started from. But if there's any physical matter anywhere, it interacts and you lose that constant speed of light. But as long as there is no physical matter in between, it does seem to move at the speed of light. There's a lot more to it, but I don't want to get sidetracked on only one little point, and so that you don't see the trees for the forest. Here's another multiple choice question. As you can see, I'm beginning to believe in multiple choice questions. And this question is titled, is Venus rotating in the wrong direction? A lot of people say so. Some textbooks say so. Some have thought so and don't. But you make up your own mind where you stand on whether or not Venus is rotating in the wrong direction. My take on this is this. Since I think I tease you enough, every once in a while I should share my position on this. No, I think I lean towards item D, but it appears so due to 177 degrees tilt of rotational axis. In other words, you are looking at the same clockwise motion from the bottom, which appears counterclockwise. So it's not rotating in the wrong direction. It just appears that way, just as when I flush my toilet here, it goes counterclockwise, and I'm presenting a paper on general relativity and gravitation, 18th conference in Sydney, Australia, which is below the equator. I'm dying to go there and flush the toilet and see if it goes clockwise. Honestly. Huh? Right. But I suspect, now of course don't get me wrong, you can design a toilet bowl that will go the wrong way. But then you're designing it that way. You're forcing it to go in the wrong direction. And of course if the force is strong enough, it will overcome the Coriolis force or whatever it is. But given everything else being equal, I think above the equator, it does go counterclockwise. And below the equator, same movement appears clockwise. But you're looking at it from the other side in the toilet bowl when you are in Australia, if that makes sense. You know what I mean. I know it sounds silly and funny, but you know what I'm talking about. Okay. Now, this is, there's the, whatever it is. Anyways, Now we have, I want to share with you another little thing, because after 4 days of grueling theories, hypotheses, some false, some partially right, some not right at all, you get to a point you are really, really stressed. And my question to you is there a simple way you know that you can convert your stress into something sweet like dessert? And I say, yes, there is. All you have to do is spell stress backwards. And it becomes desserts. So there is a way to relieve your stress. Now, back to the main premise. The FTPU as a small part of IEVU, finite temporal physical universe, as a small part of infinite eternal virtual universe. And that's what it looks like. Now I'm really making a shift from science to maybe human body or many other things. But this particular one is related more to human body. And there is a tremendous amount of debate among doctors, biologists, psychologists, and everything. And this is how I synthesize from what I can gather what they're saying. And that is that they may all be right, but they don't know. Just like Aristotle and Galileo were comparing apples and oranges and didn't know, and the debate flourished. Same thing, I think, is happening in paranormal phenomena today. In a way, they're all agreeing, but since they don't know they're all agreeing because of the limitations of the language or for whatever else, or wrong hypotheses, or any number of reasons, it appears that everybody's saying, finger pointing, no, you're wrong, I'm right, you're wrong, I'm right, and that keeps going on and on and on. Now, here's what I see it as. Now, if you look at it, on the top I show FPU, finite temporal physical unit, as part of the virtual universe. And I have 3 channels to it to explain all of the phenomena from doctors, from psychologists, and from people who believe in environment. And I think all 3 play a role. Well, first of all, there are 3 channels. First, the one we are most familiar with as physical beings is that we have 5 senses and motor functions. We have eyes, nose, ear, mouth, and we collect data from this. Directly from our birth, we begin to start collecting that data. But we can also collect the same data or similar data or some other data from the environment. A child begins to play with toys. He begins to learn a little bit about the toys. And until he becomes a natural philosopher, then he knows a lot more. But at any rate, this is one channel. The other channel is your mind, which is part of, but quite separate from the brain. See, these 5 senses are for the brain, not necessarily for the brain, even though they're linked. So your mind has beliefs and thoughts, and your soul and mind and 6th sense is the other component, which is interfaced to the infinite virtual universe. And that one goes through what they call supernatural, which is what the science does not recognize, and that's where Richard Dawkins goes bananas. But that's okay. He does not recognize one of the 3 legs. I mean, if you want to ignore some fact, if you want to solve a jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces, more power to you. But I need all the pieces, as dumb as I am, to solve the jigsaw puzzle. So I take advantage of all of them. So this is 2nd channel, infinite universe. This is 1 channel. And then beliefs and thoughts are shared between soul, mind, and 5 senses during dreams, at night, and maybe some other phenomena during the day also that we are not aware of. But we are never aware of our mind-brain communications. We are aware of our brain communications with other people, but we are not aware of our brain communications with our mind to your mind to your brain, and then finally the way we communicate is what you say with your 5 senses and I perceive with those 5 senses. So that's the only channel that's working for us. But I think the other channels are also working. We just don't know it. And then the third one, of course, is this. This one has kind of 2 components. We, through the 5 senses and brain, have a language. English, German, whatever. And I'm not counting computer languages, just languages. But if you'd also notice, we also have emotions. I happen to believe that just as language is the communication mode through 5 senses of the human body and brain, same way emotions are the communication from the mind. When you love somebody, when you hate somebody, even simple laughter is being contributed more by this part than by this part, even though I do so show some invisible interaction between the two. So the brain body is here with 3 channels of communications. What does brain body do? Genes. That's where the debate, that's where they want to pull hair out of their head and kill each other. They're saying, oh, no, 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 somebody is a homosexual because it's in the genes. Somebody says, no, it's not. You know what I mean? Oh, somebody claims, I was cured by prayer. And the doctor would say, there's no possible way you can be cured. You have to change medically something. And of course, they both work. You can administer medicine and change not only genes, but also everything genes control. And I didn't draw the whole thing because genes was the highest, toughest layer. And I'm suggesting that brain body has a means of changing genes, and so as the virtual universe, the mind.
What yoga says, you can change your genes.
Right.
Exactly what yoga says.
You can change your genes. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, but I'm saying there's more than one way to change your genes. I think doctors recognize, the invasive ways of changing genes, and that's right. I'm not disagreeing with it, but that's not the only way to change genes. Okay? I mean, there have been a lot of instances if somebody listens to them and studies them with an open mind. Now, if you study something with closed mind, you're not going to get anything out of it. But if you study it with an open mind, you will find extremely well documented where the patient goes to the doctor, and doctor says, you will live 3 weeks and no more, and you will die. And he goes to 6 months later, and he prays, and something happens, and 6 months later, he's living. So the doctor does another x-ray, and he says, I can't understand. Now, these are doctors who have gone under oath to say that, yes, the previous x-ray showed this cancer, this x-ray doesn't show it, and I have no explanation for it.
That's the wrong patient.
Huh?
You had the wrong patient then.
Yes. Whatever. You can always have. Anyway, my time is, 6. I don't know how much time I have. But anyway, let me keep going until, give me 5 to 10 minutes warning for Q&A.
You're coming up with 6 minutes, what, 5 minutes?
Okay, then let me do a couple more slides, or should I take the questions now? Would you rather see more slides, or would you rather ask questions?
Ask questions.
You ask questions? Okay, let's go to the questions.
I got a question for you.
Certainly.
I like experiments. So let's say somebody sits out there on Earth who is his back to us. It's a very simple experiment. If somebody is going to look at the back of his head for half a minute or so, the subject is going to turn around. How is the subject detecting the attention of the other person?
I have a slide on that too, but you asked me to skip it.
We know and all that.
Doesn't matter. In fact, I can be.
My question is,
Yes.
is that a physical phenomenon or is it a virtual phenomenon?
It can be combination of both. Like, remember I showed the link between the two, and one is visible to us, the other is not.
I would say that the boundary between what you call physical and virtual is not thick. We can push it further.
Yes, and of course, I want to make it a little harder for you to make that discernment. If I had time, I would. Because, you see, in my mind at least, the separation between body-brain, which is kind of one thing, and mind-soul, which is another thing, is very clear. When you die, you leave your brain and your body behind. But your mind and your soul both go someplace. Okay. But what is more difficult to understand is not the relationship of body and brain with mind and soul, but the relationship with intelligence and spirit. Because intelligence and spirit are so closely coupled with mind and soul that distinction is harder to study, which I would love to study. I mean, many times it appears to me that spirit is kind of a generic name. It is a matter, sort of, I mean, very fine virtual matter. And so is intelligence, a very fine virtual matter. And our mind is probably made of the same material of which intelligence is made of as the raw material. And our soul is made of the same material of which the intangible stuff of the rest of the universe is made up of. But anyway, the point I was trying to make in answer to your question, I put this slide, is that it doesn't matter whether there's a curtain there or not. All I'm saying is that you can do this experiment yourself. You can be sitting in a chair and one of your kids or wife or somebody comes in, or even in a restaurant sometimes, somebody really starts staring at your neck. Now, men are not quite as good at that, but women, more of the time, are able to say, why is this guy staring at me? And of course, instead of trying to study it, they start to think, oh, maybe he loves me. Maybe I can get a divorce and marry him. Maybe somebody's interested in me. You know, so they take it as a compliment rather than as a scientific phenomenon to study. So you know what I mean. Anyway, more questions, because I have lots of slides. Yes.
I just want to make a comment. I just want to thank you for being somebody else here that understands where we're coming from, right? Because we are one with this whole thing. We know where we came from. We know where we are now. We know where we're going. We know what's going to happen to us when we die. There is no death. There is no death, you know. And all things are open to us. And we are in heaven eternal now. That's right.
Well, that does.
And I cured my husband of cancer. That's right. She cured cancer.
See, so here's a witness that they went through.
I've been reborn and I'm ready to live another whole life.
Now, since I don't understand, just for the record, be it known that I am not fully cognizant of all their work. So if he convinces you that he and I are in 100% agreement, it's on his word. I'm not saying that, because I think I may have differences, and you know what I mean?
You're supposed to.
Yeah, I support it. I mean, how much, yeah. But I'm saying is, don't attribute everything he said yesterday to me also. Not necessarily I'm disagreeing or agreeing with it, but I'm saying is I have not made that determination. So, Francisco Miller.
For the matter of historical record, I have to say that Galileo never did the experiment on the living.
Oh, wherever. You know, but you know the story.
Before Galileo,
Yes, he did it on inclined planes.
the Italian man called Bohr did the same experiment.
Yeah.
He noticed that one body came a little bit before the other because of the buoyant force of air.
Right.
Now, when Aristotle said that heavy bodies go faster, because he thought that all motion is in a resistive medium. And in water, the heavier rock flows faster than the lighter.
Right.
I know this because I worked 27 years in
Right.
centrifugation theory,
Yeah.
where we measure the mass of molecules by how fast they centrifuge rather than light.
Right.
So Aristotle had this always idea that there's a medium, the ether, the quintessence, and therefore it has to be differential velocity. He was wrong experimentally. When you said that Galileo didn't prove Aristotle wrong, I thought that you meant to say he proved him wrong in this experiment, but not in the whole philosophical view of Aristotle, which is really much wider than even Galileo had.
Which is probably true. That's what. See, I was going by the folklore. Yes. Time is up.
Yeah.
Let's cut it. We start on time. We finish on time. Go home and eat. Eat your heart out. Thank you. In private. You can do as many comments in private.